Thank you all for joining us for our Green Labs webinar today. I'm Katie. I'm a program coordinator in the Office of Climate Action. We help to coordinate climate action and sustainability efforts across the university, and we do a lot of work with our climate action group over at Rutgers Health and with Marcela Rodriguez, who is our guest speaker for today. We're co-hosting this webinar with her and the Rutgers Green Labs Initiative, which she runs. Marcela is also an associate professor of medicine at the New Jersey Medical School and a member of the Rutgers Health Climate Action Group and a lead for the Rutgers Green Labs Initiative and the Green Labs Committee on the Rutgers Health Climate Action Group. So without further ado, Marcela, I'll hand it over to you. And thank you so much for being our presenter today and co-hosting the webinar.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And can you see my whole screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you all very much to be here today to join me to talk about sustainability in research laboratories. I would like to start by just a note that although scientific research and all the work that we do, and I am a researcher, I should say, generally contributes to the progression of humanity in some form, we should be aware of the disproportional environmental footprint of our work in the laboratory. And operating a sustainable lab not only is beneficial for the environment, but in the long run, it can really reduce the cost of operating a lab. So it's in everybody's interest to place sustainability at the forefront of operating a research laboratory. And we know that lab work is a resource-intensive activity. Laboratories consume 10 times more energy than office buildings, 4 times more water, and a lot of plastic. Reagents and chemical use is also enormous. The increase on IT and growing digitalization and communication in the lab is a main contributor for carbon dioxide emissions and other activities outside of the work in the lab, like flying to conferences and meetings. That has a big impact. Actually, a recent report look at the environmental impact of on-site meeting that happened in 2019 before the pandemic, and the equivalent in 2020, which was virtual, and there was a decrease by 3,000-fold in the carbon footprint. So what I like to do today is that if you're here, so that tells me that you're interested in taking action about sustainability in the research laboratory. So I would like to give you some practical tips and small things that, even though they're simple, they can have a big impact in the carbon footprint of your laboratory. And I would say the best place to start is to look closer at the procedures, methods, techniques that are conducted in your own labs and identify optimization potential. But I am going to give you some very simple and practical things that everyone can do. I'd like to start by reminding everyone that currently, practically 100% of the electricity that powers Rutgers comes from burning fossil fuels. And as you all know, burning fossil fuels generate greenhouse gases, particularly CO2, that trap heat in the atmosphere and are main contributors to global warming. Annually, Rutgers emits currently about almost 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide. We hope that the university will move towards cleaner energy, but that is not happening currently to a large extent. So we cannot just sit down and wait for the university to increment clean energy. There are many things that we can do at this moment. So there are several areas that we can focus in reducing your lab footprint: energy, waste, water, and microchemistry. Looking at energy, a typical lab consumes a lot of energy in heating, lights, fans, pumps, everything that you plug, equipment, everything that you plug is using electricity, of course. So that means that everything we do can have an impact. And simple things count, like disconnecting equipment that is not in use. Maybe if there are pieces of equipment that you would like to be cold or hot by the time you get to the lab or at a certain time, consider using electrical timers. They're very inexpensive, and you can get them in any Amazon or any other shops, and use them for those pieces of equipment. Turning off lights in empty rooms, and maximize the use of natural light. In my experience in this building, which it holds maybe 200 investigators, common rooms like freezer rooms and equipment rooms are usually always on with the lights on, because nobody is actually thinking that this is a problem. It's not in our minds. We're thinking about our experiments, but not necessarily in the impact of those. So I encourage you to, wherever you are, whatever the building that you work, become a Green Lab advocate and raise awareness of this problem and the things that we can do. If we want to focus in big items, equipment consumes a lot of energy. Fume hoods and chemical hoods consume as much as 3 households daily. If you have one of these hoods in your lab, I will suggest to talk to your building manager if it's okay. Ask if it's okay to keep the lid of the hood closed when not using it, because that is the main reason why this equipment consumes so much energy, because those fans to recirculate the air are constantly on if the lid is open. Now, in some buildings, like the building where I work, the air circulation is connected to the fans, or the hood is connected to the central air circulation in the building. So we were advised not to close the lid of the hoods, which is unfortunate, because these have a huge impact. So ask if that's possible. That would be a great thing if you can keep that lid closed. Ultra low temperature freezers are also big consumers of energy, equivalent to one average home per day. And we'll talk more about freezers in a moment. But every equipment, even a small water bath, it consumes as much energy as your dishwasher per hour, and a heat block as much as your TV set per hour. So none of us will leave our dishwasher running all the time at home or our TV on, but nevertheless, we tend to leave water baths always on and heat blocks always on. So it's to have these things in mind. Ultra low temperature freezers. These are, again, big consumers of electricity. The NIH reported, did a study to evaluate factors affecting the performance, the energy consumption and carbon footprint of ultra low temperature freezers, and concluded that many factors affect these parameters. So they recommend simple practices like remove ice regularly from the doors of your freezers, minimize sample size and clean out unwanted samples so that you use less space and you don't have to buy a second freezer because you run out of room. Keeping a good inventory is very, very important to minimize the time one is looking into the freezer for something and cannot find it because it's not known where it is. And switching the temperature from -80 to -70. This is an action that is a bit controversial, even though over 2,000 labs all over the world are doing this. Ultra low temperature freezers used to be, and if any of you have been working in labs since 20 years ago, they used to be set -65 or -70. Only in the 1980s, late 1980s, 1990s, producers of these freezers start to advertise lower temperatures, -80 or even -86. And these 10 degrees changes come to a considerable cost, up to 30% higher energy use. Even if your freezer is the last model, still, if you switch the temperatures from -80 to -70, there will be a saving in energy consumption. No evidence was provided that lower temperatures improve sample stability or recovery. And if you want scientific facts, the crystallization point of water is 0 degrees. There's another recrystallization temperature point that is -60 to -63, and a second recrystallization point at -130. Those are critical temperatures for long-term storage of samples. -80, however, is not a critical temperature. And one concern that raises when asking people to switch this, to make this switch of temperature, is that maybe if the freezer is at -70, it will get defrosted much faster than at -80 in the case of complete power loss. So again, this has been looked at, and a -80 freezer will take 19 hours, 45 minutes to reach -20 versus 19 hours, 10 minutes to reach -20 if your freezer is at -80. So it buys you 35 minutes, which again, to a considerable cost. And this is in the case of complete power outage for more than 19 hours. The temperature impact of opening a door is similar between freezers at -80 or -70. What it is critical for temperature stability is having a partial empty freezer. That heats up considerably faster than one at full capacity. So consider filling empty spaces in your freezer, if you have, with, for instance, styrofoam boxes or ice blocks. that helps to minimize the temperature change. Another concern of switching the temperature is sample integrity and stability. And there are not many studies comparing samples kept at -70 or -80. But again, this was not done when the temperature of the freezers were changed to -80 either. Nevertheless, I'd like to direct you to the website of my Green Lab, which is shown here. This is a nonprofit organization that is very active in promoting sustainability in science. And in there, you'll find a list of that is posted. It's an Excel sheet posted by the Colorado State University, where investigators are documenting their samples and what the temperature are they storing them and for how long, and if there's any effects. And they have a list of certainly DNA is not affected, bacterial or fungi isolates, proteins in serum, plasma, antibodies, a number of type of biological samples, which are not, there's no effect on sample integrity or stability. So I'll invite you to visit this list if you want to find out if your particular samples could be affected. Okay, moving into waste management. And on average, a scientist can produce 400 grams of plastic waste daily. Close to 6 million tons of plastic waste are generated by life science laboratories globally. That constitutes 2% of total global plastic waste. So it's really mind-blowing. The best we can do is reduce, because there's little that we can replace and much little that we can recycle. So the emphasis here is to reduce the use of plastics unless it's strictly necessary for your experiment. But there's things that we can reuse without having to worry about our experiment. Avoid extra packaging when you order. These styrofoam rags and plastic rags. Styrofoam is particularly problematic because we don't have a program for recycling styrofoam currently. There are some ideas to do that, but right now we don't have anything in place for that. Ordering in bulk is good only if you're gonna use that much. Otherwise, it's costly. Many companies are offering these refillable systems for pipette tips that are very useful in terms of reducing the waste from empty pipette tip boxes. And some suppliers are also proactively addressing this problem. Eppendorf, I like to highlight, Eppendorf is producing now plastic tubes of all sizes that are made with at least 90% bio-based plastic. It's basically from cooking oil. So consider ordering from companies that are actively trying to minimize the carbon footprint of their supplies. And here on the theme of reducing, I like to introduce Replay. Replay is an asset management and exchange platform. It allows all Rutgers members to share equipment and supplies, office supplies, lab supplies across campuses to scale circular economy efforts. This is a great idea. I invite all of you to look at their website. The link is posted here. And this really will, it helps save money, save your lab, saving money in your lab, reduce emission and landfill waste. Again, they have all kinds of things, from supplies to office equipment, and equipment for the lab. You can exchange there using this platform. Replace, whenever possible, replace disposable for reusable. There's no need to use an individually packed sterile plastic pipette to work, for instance, with E. coli cultures. If you consider using glass pipettes that can be autoclaved and reused, and any other supplies that you can replace single use for reusable, please consider doing so. Recycle, as I said, this is the least efficient way of taking care of managing waste. Nevertheless, we should exploit any opportunity that we have to provided by the university to recycle bottle cans and paper, of course. But in terms of laboratory supplies, companies are very willing to help you by taking back some of the packaging and of their supplies. For instance, USA has the representative can bring these containers to your laboratory or your building, where you can put the empty racks of the pipette tips refillable systems, and they collect them. If you call them, they collect them when they're full. They're very good at that. You can also use companies that you can mail back, like Corning, Falcon, Oxygen, ART, and Olympus have a program where you can just mail back all these plastic wrappings and containers. You can send it back to them and they can reuse them. So take advantage of that. This is at no cost. This recycle doesn't cost us anything. Now, the other alternative, but that has some cost, is several companies sell boxes to collect, for instance, empty pipette tip boxes, and you can mail the full box to them. The cost of the box includes the cost of mailing of the full box. There's currently only one company that I know of that is doing really circular recycling, meaning that you can send them your plastic, and they use that to manufacture new products. That's full circle, and that company is Polycarbon. So I invite you to look at their website, and again, they also sell these boxes where you can mail back your plastic, and they can reuse it. And they even give you some discount when you order from them the new products. More about recycling. Again, some companies, you can pack all your wrappers and plastic and racks and extra packaging and send it back to them. Sigma Millipore, for instance, has now a program that when you receive something in a styrofoam box with ice or dry ice or something, you can empty the styrofoam box, and in the same cardboard box that you received, there is a label for mailing the box to them at no cost. You just have to put it in the mail, and they take it back. And this is a great program because, as I said, recycling styrofoam is very complicated. Water. You might not know that it takes 3 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of deionized water. So have that in mind. Single pass cooling systems can easily lead to one lab using more than 13,000 gallons of water each year. Autoclaves, especially if they are old, autoclaves, they can use large amounts of water, 60 gallons of water per cycle. So consolidating loads on the autoclave is a great way to reduce water and energy consumption by autoclaves, for instance. And any way that you can reduce water use. The same goes for chemicals and reagents. Microchemistry is a great way to reduce the use of chemical and reagents. In the RESS, the Rutgers Environmental Health Science website, you'll find information on how to reduce chemical and hazardous waste, microscaling, having a good inventory, substituting chemicals that are more environmentally friendly. And they also have the link to a list of unused and open chemicals that they have that people can have access to. And they recently updated this list. So I'll strongly suggest that if you before purchasing a large amount of a reagent, maybe you want to check if they have it there, or if you have unused chemicals that other people can use, they would pick it up and put it in this stock. So I would like to end with telling that this is, you might think that the little bit that you do in your lab is not going to make much of a difference, but this is a collective effort. If all of us at Rutgers, certainly all the labs at Rutgers, will be aware of the impact and the things that we can do to minimize that impact, that will make a significant difference. And with that, I'll if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much. You might want to come off of screen share just so we can see everybody if they want to
Yes.
come off of mute and ask a question. If you'd like to ask a question in the chat, I'm happy to read your question out loud for you. Madison, do you want to kick off questions?
Yeah, I just would love to hear what you think could be done to better recycling programs, at least within, I guess, a lab setting, or, that'd be more.
Yes, the problem is that companies do not take lab supplies to recycle because they are contaminated with biological materials. So,
but I guess my question would be, is there a process to decontaminate? I know it'd be pricey, of course, and time consuming, but
unfortunately, there isn't. But I'm glad you bring that point up. So you all have these boxes with red bags in your lab where you're supposed to put all your waste, right? what happens to those boxes? Where do they go? So they get incinerated, and then they go to a landfill, right? So one way to minimize the carbon footprint of that is to not put in those boxes things that are not contaminated with anything, like your paper towels or your wrappers, or right? Because unfortunately, yeah, there's no way to recycle that material, but there are ways to reduce it.
Thank you very much. It was I'm not super aware of the whole lab scheme, so it's very interesting to me. But thank you.
Great.
And Lisa, I have you up next on my screen.
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely presentation. I think it's really good that we all start at least thinking about this. And I think you hit the point that there's little we can do. I put in a link, a little Q&A from a lab at Rockefeller University that is very good about forcing his lab people to adopt greener ways. You know, they rinse out pipettes. My husband's had a student who ended up in the lab, and he came back and was telling us about this. So I think that's actually a nice little resource, especially for the the biologists. I'm not sure it would apply to chemists. But the other question I have is, before the pandemic, I started going to meet. I started trying to figure out why our recycle bins, like just in our offices, not anyplace else, were dumped into the garbage can. And when I started to do a deep dive, and I went to some of the initial climate meetings that they were having right before we shut down, the answer is Rutgers wasn't really recycling anything other than paper. So do you know does anybody know the status of this? I haven't come back to it since the pandemic. I mean, I know at least in our building, I have a little bag here. I take my, can back home. Anything that is actually really recyclable, I just take it home. I think so I guess my point is I think Rutgers has a bigger non-recycling problem that would actually make a bigger impact than actually our labs, which are horrible from an environmental standpoint. So do you guys know anything about this?
My understanding is that paper and cardboard and soda cans and water bottles that go into these blue containers are being recycled. Before a couple of years ago, actually, I started the activities of the Green Lab group here because we had no containers to put water bottles, plastic water bottles, and soda cans, and they were going into the regular garbage. Of course, there was no recycling of that. But as I said, recycling is very limited, and when it comes to laboratory supplies, is practically zero.
Yeah, I think the other thing, we worked with biosafety with REHS right before the pandemic, and they actually gave us the okay to I think it's more wish cycling, but at least it made us feel better, like plastic bottles that had PBS and media and were actually recyclable. So they were letting us put them in the recycle bins, which actually were then going in the garbage can, which is what started me with trying to look a little bit more into this. So something to think about. REHS will let you put some of the, go ahead, yes.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna hop in real quick. Yes, generally plastics are the hardest to recycle. I'm going to kick it over to Angie for the Rutgers recycling explanation though, because there's a lot at play.
Okay. Yeah, Lisa, that I find that extremely interesting because it seems like it varies from department to department, building to building, because I was told that we could not put those bottles from PBS that are not contaminated with anything, PBS or of tissue culture medium, in the recycling. So it's very interesting that you were told that that was possible.
Well, I worked with REHS. It took a couple back and forths with the biosafety person to actually get them to I mean, we had to take the label off and rinse them, and then we were allowed to put them in there. So anyway.
Okay, that's good. That's very good to know, because yeah, we can ask them directly, but there should be a unified policy for that kind of waste.
And
one thing that it occurred to me that there are, for instance, for gloves are not recyclable because by definition we use them with biological materials, but there are companies that are manufacturing biodegradable gloves, meaning that are regular gloves, and depends on what they're made of, generally never biodegrade. But there are now some products in the market that it takes some time, but like 2 years to biodegrade, but they do. So that's one option. Yeah, we cannot recycle them, but at least we can reduce the time that they end up in a landfill.
And also for context about broader Rutgers recycling, I know some of the signage can be a little bit disparate in places, especially from being in dorms when I was a student at Rutgers and now as a staff member, but Rutgers has actually been recycling since about the 70s. Angie, our director for the office, could probably share a bit more than I can about recycling though.
Yeah. So,
Hi,
you all hear me? I'm sorry, I had to switch off my AirPods because it doesn't always pick up the microphone. Yeah, so I was part of the process for the climate action planning, and we had many town halls, and recycling is something that came up at every single town hall. And there's just, if there was one area of sort of misinformation around Rutgers, I know recycling is it. I know that there's questions about enrollment, et cetera, but it is about recycling. And it's because I completely understand this, having gotten my PhD and being a student at Rutgers. So like, I know what it looks like and being a faculty member, I know what it looks like from all the different places, and it looks that way. I've seen the people in my old faculty office come and take my recycling bin and throw it in the trash. And so I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I will say that is not actually the case. I've actually physically gone to the recycling plant and watched the loads of recycling come off the truck from Rutgers. We recycle depending on what campus you're at. If you're on the New Brunswick campus, we recycle at the Colgate plant in East Brunswick, just down the road. We get a report from them. I think we get a report weekly, but we aggregate monthly on the weight of the load and the cleanliness of the load. So how pure our recycling is. And we do recycle more than paper. Recycle plastic and recycle glass. And so we are not at 100% recycling. That is absolutely the case. And a lot of this has to do with on-the-ground maintenance. A lot of it has to do with behavior for the recycler or the end user. So there's many, many ways that we can improve. However, Rutgers does recycle, and we recycle quite a bit. And we have been recycling since the 70s. We were actually a leader in campus recycling and have won Recyclemania, which is a national competition for higher ed institutions, for years and years in a row. And so Rutgers recycles. We're not great at it. There's lots of room for improvement, but it is actually the case that we do recycle, and we do it pretty well.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that there's no recycling in Rutgers, but when it comes to laboratory waste, plastic waste, I think, I mean, in my experience, there's no recycling.
Yeah. Angie, can I thank you so much for that, because I think a lot of this, I'm in the med school. I'm at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. And I think a lot of it comes from, the merging. And I think a lot of the Rutgers, how do I say this, policies haven't still completely transferred over. So I think it's very spotty depending upon the building, because I can still sit in my office with my recycle bin with nothing but paper and watch the janitor, throw it into the regular garbage. So is there somebody I can start bugging the med school about this again, now that the pandemic has sort of, kind of calmed down. I think we could come back to this, but is there somebody better to contact?
So I guess it depends on the details, right? So it's going to depend on the details of who you're talking about, but it might just be a building level conversation. And so there's sort of two ways. You're absolutely right that the policies at the top have not necessarily all integrated, as we do a million mergers a year when we sort of merge, but it's not always the best process. So yes, at the top there's also issues. There are also issues sort of at the on the ground. So that individual person, and it might be that question. We do single stream recycling. That is a piece that we do. I know people are often confused about how that functions. But I think that the question, we should probably have an offline conversation about what actual building you're in, where your office is actually located, and maybe we'll start from the ground up and figure it out, because it's so variable.
Yeah, I mean, I need to go do a little bit more snooping too. Like I said, I totally kind of, everybody got distracted. Plus, I also felt like there was other things that we needed to worry about, that, recycling wasn't really high on the list. But I'm going to write your name down and I'll email you. Let me go do some legwork on my own, and before I come back to you, because you're right. I think some of this is just, education. I'm not even sure there's recycle bins on the loading dock, but I'll go look. I'm good at this. I'll be in touch.
That's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
I'm also seeing I'm seeing the comments about the film. So there's a question that people have about recycling and these sort of like clear plastic bags. Now this is like a huge question. And so what ends up happening is that if the recycling is collected in a clear plastic bag, the person in IP&O who oversees this, his team has to actually go through with a razor blade and cut them all open, because we can't send them to the recycling facility in those bags, because that recycling, it will just clog up the whole facility. A lot of it is automated. It's done with cameras and magnets. Most of the recycling is sorted through machines, basically. There's a little bit of human, what I call waste picking that happens. So we can't bring any of those sort of clear plastic bags and send them to the recycling facility. And so there's a team at Rutgers whose whole job is to take the recycling and literally razor blade open those recycling bags so they don't go, because we get charged. And so when we get our report card, how well we did on recycling, where they tell us how clean it was, that includes things like those filmy bags, because they just gum up the whole works there. So yeah.
And gloves with like the similar texture that's kind of floppy and squishy and gets stuck in things. So
100%.
But that's plastic waste. Unfortunately, I personally take all these bags, plastic bags, to my town, and my local ShopRite has a container for plastic bags, so I put them there. But if ShopRite can recycle plastic bags, maybe Rutgers can also do it.
it has to be a very specific waste stream. So that's what ShopRite is doing. And I mentioned in like the chat too, if it's like all squishy filmy plastics of the same type or a similar type, then they can make some sort of low quality plastic out of it. But it's also just like a combination of it getting stuck in the big single stream machines and just the quality of the plastic. But also something interesting that folks might be excited about. As part of our climate action groups, we have procurement teamed up with our waste management folks. So we can talk all day long about recycling, but like Gloria mentioned in her presentation, we really need to reduce our use of single-use items and reuse when possible. And so that's why procurement is teamed up with waste management. I see Wes on the call. He's one of our wonderful co-chairs for that climate action group. So really trying to take a look at what are we actually purchasing and bringing into the university, yes, and is that going to end up in our trash? Maybe any other questions? I don't want to take over the conversation too much here.
Thank you so much for doing this. I think it's great that we start becoming more aware, because that's a big part of it, is just thinking, we tell our people in our lab, think about what you're doing. You can use one pipette, start with your water, and then so there's also the little strategies you can teach people in your little microenvironment, that it's a tiny little thing, but I feel like it really adds up. And somebody made the comment that people wear a lot of gloves that are totally unnecessary. Totally, yes, agree. We forget, yes, we're protecting most of the time protecting our samples from us, not ourselves. So.
But it's funny, because I tell my postdocs and students, there is this idea that gloves are sterile. They're not. So by using gloves, you're not necessarily protecting your sample. And there are cases when it's just not necessary.
Definitely something we got to get everybody on board with. I see a question in the chat from Marika. Is there an opportunity to partner with companies or even researchers at Rutgers who are developing more innovative polymers and plastics for lab use?
That's a very great question. I don't know. I forward it to Angie.
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. I think there's like a step further. So yes, and actually I just was on a call. I hate to put Wes on the spot here because he's listening in. But I was just on a call with him this morning about this question about how do we do a better job vetting our vendors as they come in. And we're thinking of maybe a stopgap that we might be able to come up with to have a better job of getting and identifying sustainable vendors, particularly around labs. The other thing I'll say in response to Marika's question is that I would love for us to also be looking at some of these big questions, like we talk about the filmy plastic, not kind of like being useless. I mean, there are a couple of uses, but I know that even as long ago as like a decade ago, there were folks at I think it was MIT that were looking at ways to turn like old grocery bags into carbon nanotubes. So there's a lot of it's amazing, right?
Innovation.
And so this amazing. They're super strong. They were looking at it for things like suspension bridges, so they wouldn't have to deal with like stainless steel roping corroding basically in like salt water because we don't actually know how stable our. Anyway, there are some research opportunities for these sort of end product landfill destined things that perhaps we could close the loop. But to Katie's point, I think the question really is being more cognizant of who we can partner with, so we're not bringing things onto campus that don't have a life cycle that's usable or that's infinite. They don't have an infinite life cycle because recycling is really like we've failed if that's what we're focusing on.
Yes.
Like we have failed largely if we're focusing on recycling. That's not where we need to be at. We do need to recycle, absolutely. But if that's where we're putting all of our energy, we sort of like we lost the plot, right? That's not the point. So that's a long way of saying yes, absolutely. Those are great ideas, Marika, and would love to see someone doing work on how to find a new life for these like end of life products.
Yes, I like to say that also suppliers and vendors are very interested in these initiatives, and whenever possible, communicate with your sales rep and encourage these initiatives. I emailed to Fisher when I realized that they are not sending things like reagents or chemical things that need to be in ice. They're not using styrofoam boxes anymore. If you notice, they are using corrugated cardboard boxes with an ice pack inside. And so that I think that's great. And I let them know that kind of initiative I would support, and I will spread the voice, because so when ordering from a company, if you have the same product with the same price, but there's a company that is doing implementing these initiatives for Green Labs, use them. I will suggest to the procuring department that in marketplace, maybe we can have a green leaf next to companies that are selling green products to highlight those efforts, because it benefits everybody.
And I agree. This is Western procurement. So this is all great information and things that we're looking to do. And like you said, leverage the representatives from the suppliers and leverage us procurement as well. I'm on the call. Sabrina's on the call. So she's more in our lab space. So she deals more with those suppliers to promote, sustainable products within the catalogs and so forth. So they're very supportive. We can further engage and use them to support us in our initiatives.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think we have time for about one more question.
Yeah, one last thing. If anybody is ready to start using glass pipettes for applications instead of plastic pipettes, I have a collection here of all sizes, extra that you can autoclave, and they're ready for you to use. Just send me an email and I'll bring them to you, or you can pick them up, because that's a great way to reduce plastic waste.
Can I ask one quick question that's not necessarily about the labs, but I was struck by the first slide that we're all fossil fuel. What about all the solar panels that are going up? When does that go online and start returning some of the energy back? Does anybody know? Or
Angie?
Yeah, those are scheduled to all be electrified by January. And so we are, as of January, we should be fully electrified for those. And we already have 2 other solar canopies and a solar farm that have been online for, I want to say, 11 and 13 years. And so those have been producing energy online or for Rutgers for over a decade. But this is sort of the second wave, and those are expected to all be electrified by January.
And we also have at least one building that's running on geothermal energy, which is exciting too. And we have one final question. Oh, feel free to come off of mute. I see you have your hand raised.
That'd be me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Well, thanks so much, Katie, and also Gloria. I really enjoy your presentation. Just one generic question. I mean, this is obviously our biomedical kind of research groups can have a huge impact. So I wonder whether there's a way to track how well we're doing over time. That's one way. I don't know how feasible that would be. But and the other point is whether there could be, some kind of a roadshow where, let's say, I'm not saying I don't want to put a lot of load on you, let's say Gloria, but a group of individuals might go around to different buildings, different major, let's say, schools, units, things of that sort, and just talk about, best practices. And there might be some issues like a building may not even know, who they can contact, just simple stuff like this, because we're so broad and all over the place that I think it's very difficult. And some people don't even know. I've heard multiple times that different buildings have different ways of recycling and so on. As I think Angie had mentioned. So we're definitely not doing things in a uniform way. So somehow tracking, educating, things of that sort, partnering would be great.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So
You're listening to this like I'm listening to this?
I've listened to this.
I am a simple research faculty. I have a small lab, and I started this Green Lab group here at my building a couple of years ago because I just couldn't take it anymore. That seeing so much waste and so much, that people are not thinking about this. But I'm one person. So the idea of this and the climate action groups at Rutgers Health is basically to use this model that I have started here and expand it to the rest of the university. And I'm happy to give us a monthly seminar, a monthly webinar about this and spread the voice. But what I would like to accomplish is that each one of you that is attending this webinar today start their own Green Lab group in whatever department you are, in whatever building you are, so that it's really a collective effort, because there's a lot we can do. It's simple things. It's not, and people are willing to help. It's just, in many cases, they don't know what to do, where to start.
One of the things that we're doing this semester with under Marcela's guidance is we have an intern who's creating a Green Labs guide that's specific to Rutgers. So she spent a good amount of time looking at examples from other institutions, and Marcela was really great in giving us some examples and taking some of the information also from Marcela's slides, but then saying, how is this specific to Rutgers? That will be done at the end of this semester. And so then it might be the case that we send that out, and people who want something that's specific to their lab, maybe we could come in and talk to them. But I think that's a really great place to start. I see someone mentioned in the chat about including this in lab training. Absolutely. I think that if the Green Guide were just a part of the lab training, the Green Guide that we're producing right now, that'd be fantastic. If there's a lot of energy behind this and we need some support, we can talk about making it a little bit more formal. But absolutely, I do think this is it's a combination of having access to the best practices, but then also making it specific enough to the context of each lab, because it's very idiosyncratic. The work that's done in each lab is very specific. So yeah, I think those are great ideas. And we're trying to add to this sort of publicly available collateral, and we can keep going. We can keep going as this gains a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, I have to say that Alex Ruiz is been very supportive, and we are in conversations to include a module about sustainability in the lab as part of the obligatory lab training that everybody has to take before getting their hands in the lab. So I think that would be a great way to transmit the message.
Thank you.
And Marcela, are you still looking for folks to join your Green Labs committee on the RBHS Climate Action Group?
Yeah, I mean, advocates, ambassadors for Green Labs everywhere we can. Yes, anybody that is interested and want to chat more about this or have ideas, just send me an email, and that we can talk about it.
Wonderful. So I'll send a follow-up email to everyone who is on the call with the recording for the webinar, as well as some of the links that Marcela mentioned, and the slides, and how to get involved with the Climate Action Group and Marcela's subcommittee on that Climate Action Group. Thank you all so much for being here. And if you have any questions that come up, or if you have an idea, feel free to email our office or Marcela, and we'd love to get you involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
very
much.
much.